Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association. Missouri produces wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details on the variety of products made in the state are at choosewood.com.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Sarah Fenske. The city of St. Louis has been exploring privatizing its airport for nearly 3 years now. The city hopes that a long-term lease of its biggest asset will result in a cash windfall. But last month, 2 new players entered the debate. Both St. Louis County and St. Charles County suggested that the airport could benefit from regional governance, and they want the Port Authority to take a careful look at privatization and to examine whether it's worked elsewhere. Those efforts could complicate St. Louis City's plans. It hired consultants to try to bring a deal to the table, not to examine the merits of privatization. Mayor Lyda Krewson's office seemed caught off guard a bit by the regional party's plans. Joining me by phone to talk about this issue is St. Charles County Executive Steve Ehlmann. Steve, welcome to the show.
Sarah, how are you doing?
Thank you so much for joining us. Now, you and the St. Louis County Executive asked the Port Authority to take a look at privatization. What are you hoping to achieve with that?
Well, my position on privatization really hasn't changed in the last 3 years. I've said from the very beginning that if the airport can be run more efficiently by a private entity, and we determine that in fact will happen, that's fine. We should privatize. The issue is whatever savings result from that, whatever additional revenue comes out of that, what happens to it? My position is it ought to go back into the airport and be reinvested in improving the airport or paying down the $600 million debt that the airport now has. And, of course, that's a possibility. The city could decide to do exactly that, but there's no guarantee they will, and they are representing basically 12% of the population of the region. And it's not the taxpayers of the city of St. Charles or the taxpayers of St. Charles County or St. Louis County that are paying for this. It's the people who actually fly. Mm-hmm. It's not a tax. It's a user fee. If you never fly, you don't do anything. You don't pay anything to support that airport. But when you do, ever since 1956, that airport has been supported 100% by the people who use it. And my question is, who's looking out for the interest of the people who use it in the event that we can somehow get additional revenue out of the airport?
So St. Louis City has ostensibly been sort of asking that question or some version of that question for almost 3 years now. Where do you think that process has been lacking?
You know, I really don't know that much about the process. I know that there's been a lot of complaints about transparency. At some point, there's going to have to be a public debate about this when all the consultants are finished doing whatever it is that they're doing. And then, of course, again, we're back to the question that Dr. Page and I have is who's going to make the final decision? Mm-hmm. And the city may end up making a decision that's in the best interest of the region. But I certainly think that would not include taking more money out of the airport and sending it downtown. That would include keeping the additional savings in the airport, paying down the debt, building new terminals, and doing whatever needs to be done to lower landing fees so we can attract more flights, all those types of issues.
A lot of politicians within the city of St. Louis seem to suggest that they see this as a cash windfall for the city's general fund. They're talking about what they'd like to see it do in neighborhoods, et cetera. Does that scare you a little bit?
Well, once again, the city since 1956, back in 1927, I forget exactly how much money the city paid for the airport, and they ran it for the next 20 or 30 years, and I'm sure they put some money into it. Mm-hmm. But since 1956, it's not been the taxpayers of the city putting money into the airport. It's people using the airport who have built it, and it's those people who will continue to pay off the $600 million debt as a result of building the $1 billion runway, and that's a whole other historical issue that people probably need to be aware of. Mm-hmm. But, in 1982, there was a federal statute passed which said that all airports basically have to keep the money that they make in the airport, but there was a grandfather clause that exempted the St. Louis Lambert field. And as a result of that, the city has continued to take 6.5% tax out of the airport every year. And so even today, not all the money that is made at the airport stays in the airport. But under privatization, I'm just afraid we're going to have a whole lot more money, a lot more than the $6.5 million that they take out now. We're going to have a lot more going out of the airport and being used for purposes that may be legitimate if you're a city alderman, but aren't really in the interest of the entire region. And it's the people in the entire region that are paying the bill.
You mentioned the need for a public debate. Do you see that debate being about whether privatization is a good idea for this particular airport, or do you see that debate focused on where should that money go, what you're sort of detailing here?
Well, I think the two are very, very much linked. The decision has to be made, and you can argue about what the decision should be, but then that decision may depend on who makes it. And I think the debate needs to take place in Jefferson City. The thing that people lose sight of here is that St. Charles County, St. Louis County, City of St. Louis, they're all political subdivisions of the state of Missouri.
Have you talked to people with power in Jefferson City about jumping into this debate as well?
Yeah, there's been some discussion about that. We had a big debate about it back in '97. I actually offered an amendment, got every senator from St. Louis County, St. Charles, Franklin, and Jefferson to support it. The bill eventually died, but then for several years there was a lot of discussion about some sort of regional control. Mayor Shamel back in 1992 suggested regional control of the airport because he understood that it was very much a regional asset. Now, the good thing that came out of that 1997 debate was at least St. Charles County was allowed to put a person on the advisory board for St. Louis County Airport, and we've had a person there now for the last 13 years. They keep me informed on what's going on. And basically the reports I'm getting is that the airport is doing much better and it's being run very well. But this particular group has not even been consulted on their thoughts about whether or not privatization should occur. You would think that an advisory group like that, someone might come out and ask them what they think. So once again, the St. Charles County and some other surrounding counties now have some representation in the room, but the room they're in is not the room where the decision's going to be made. And again, people need to understand that since 1956, it's been the people flying that have paid for that airport who will continue to pay off the debt, and the decision needs to be based on what's in the best interest of them, not the individuals or the taxpayers in any particular city or county.
Have you talked to Mayor Lyda Crewson since your op-ed about this subject came out in the St. Louis Business Journal?
We've talked on and on about this. I brought up this issue at a Civic Progress meeting, and she was there, and we discussed a little bit afterwards.
There's certainly been some pushback.
Pardon me?
Sorry, there's certainly been some pushback from some of the older people. They're saying if you want to have some say-so, write a check. If you don't write a check, go somewhere and sit down and shut up. That was St. Louis Alderwoman Marlene Davis. Would you be putting money on the table in order to make this a regional entity?
My question is, where is the city's check?
Well, as you say, they're taking money out of the airport. I think they feel they own it.
They're not writing. They wrote a check back in 1927. Okay, and I guess they wrote some checks up until 1956, and because they did that and own the airport, they've been able to take 6% of the revenue, which is $6.5 million last year, out of the airport each year, and that's the check that they wrote a long time ago that has paid off big time for them. Now, what check have they written since then? That's the whole point here. The city hasn't been writing any checks. You and I have been writing a check when we fly. And again, I just want to make sure that the decision that is made is in the best interest of you and me and anybody else who uses that airport in the next 10, 20 years.
Steve Ehlmann, we just have time for one more question. Ray Hartman wrote a column in the Riverfront Times this week that was somewhat critical of what you're up to, and he says that you've put on display the unbridled hypocrisy of St. Charles County with regard to our region. He basically said you've never heard of regionalism when it involves paying up or connecting in with Metro Transit. Here you are now trying to get in on something the city owns outright. What would you say to that?
What I've just said, the city owns it, but the city hasn't been paying for it and will not continue to pay for it. And, you know, in the past, the concept of regionalism has usually been, let's get St. Charles County to help pay for this or help pay for that. In this particular case, if there's one regional asset that's important to the entire region, it is the airport. And again, St. Charles County, that's the most important thing in St. Louis County to us. Not just us, but I think the entire region. That airport is absolutely the most important thing. We have a whole history, and I invite people to read it, of what decisions have been made by the city at the airport. And I would suggest that they always haven't been in the best interest of the rest of the region. Okay. And that's why I'd love to see, if you really want to talk about regionalism, let's talk about this, because once again, St. Charles County isn't paying for this. St. Louis City isn't paying for this. The people are paying for this. So this should be a regional decision.
St. Charles County Executive Steve Ehlmann, thank you so much for joining us today.
Okay, great.
This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
St. Louis Public Radio's The Gateway gives you the day's news first thing every weekday morning. From the ever-evolving relationship between St. Louis City and County to developments in the Missouri and Illinois state capitals and reports from our correspondents in Rolla and the Metro East. We put it all in a roughly 10-minute package with clarity and context. Download The Gateway wherever you get podcasts.